All right, thank you all for joining us today. We're gonna give it a minute here to allow everybody to settle in. Hope that everybody's enjoying the week so far. Give it until 2 after, and then we'll get started here. All right, I think we can kick it off. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. We welcome you to Catalyze your safe transformation with Flowmetrics. My name is Alex Brungart. On behalf of Icon Agility Services and Tasktop, I'm pleased to bring you an illustration of how our clients are optimizing business value delivery. Dan James, Agile and DevOps Coach, and Lee Reed, Senior Value Stream Architect, will discuss their experience with aligning people with technology and stakeholder satisfaction. Please note, all attendees and those who did not get to attend today will receive a recording of this webinar. We will also pause periodically for questions and comments, so please take advantage of the time with Dan and Lee. Lee, you take it away.
Sure thing. Thanks, Alex. Hey, Dan. Good day, everyone. I thought I'd kick things off with just a quick review of our plan for the session today. We're gonna, Dan and I are gonna quickly go through some stage setting slides where we'll be talking about value streams, value stream management, why that's important, and measuring the value stream, making work visible, and an important concept, learning to see with Flowmetrics. So we'll be doing that after we get through the slides with an interactive session showing Flowmetrics that have been gathered for an actual product value stream, in this case, a predictive analytics product and a set of teams that have put that together. So we'll look at those Flowmetrics, and we'll, Dan and I will talk through some scenarios where we'll try to understand a little bit more now that we're learning to see what's happening with this value stream and where there might be opportunities for improvements. And one piece I wanted to also mention, I recently was listening to a podcast with Mick Kirsten and Dean Leffingwell, and they were talking about this very subject. And one interesting thing I thought was pretty cool that Dean brought up was with SAFE and SAFE 5.0, we've added some really nice constructs to address more about business agility. I think Dean said something along the lines that over the years we've become very good and safe with our technical agility, and now it's time to up our game with business agility. And I think that ties very closely to what we're seeing in the project to product movement and the idea of using value streams and value stream management to measure our flow of business value. And it correlates to this idea that we want to tie things as closely as we can to the business so that our technical leaders and our business leaders can make great data-informed decisions for how to move ahead with the best improvements to make value flow even more effectively. So with that, we're going to work through our slides now. I'll turn it over to Dan, and he'll take us through a couple of slides here, and we'll interleave our discussion points as we get to that interactive session. Dan?
Thank you, Lee. Hello, everyone. Let's talk about value streams for a minute, because that's what this topic is primarily about. Value streams are used by lean agile companies primarily to help them organize and visualize their processes, the flow of value that results hopefully in value delivered to end customers, and which then results in revenue. And until you have been able to visualize your operational value stream, it's very difficult to find the ways to optimize it. And in order to be lean, we want to reduce the amount of waste, the long wait states between steps, the delays in delivering valuable services or products to customers. And so we use value streams as the representation of the flow of value so that it gives us the ideas of where we can optimize. If you go to the next slide, Lee. So it includes the people that are doing the work. So it represents all the people, the processes, the systems that not only cause the flow to occur, but also the people who are building the value. And we call them development value streams that are in support of the operational value streams. So whether the people are shepherding value through the operational value stream or building the solutions from a development value stream, our people are also able to help us optimize as they discover impediments in the in the value stream. And it exposes, by doing this regularly with all value streams within the organization, it exposes the bottlenecks that slows down our ability to flow value. So it's all about visualization. And with that, I'll hand it back to Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And value stream management, now that once we identify our value streams and we understand the people in the organization, the teams of team that make up this end-to-end flow from the time the customer requests something until the time the value is delivered, value stream management is this practice that focuses on flow and improving that flow of business value throughout the system. It's a systematic approach for measuring and improving flow, and we'll talk more about that as we get into our interactive session, but I hope you'll see that. And one of the key impediments to flow is this organizational set of functional areas that we all have in our organizations. We call them silos, and we talk about how they've been optimized locally to perform a function. But with lean and with thinking about things from a value stream and a customer-centric perspective, we want to try to think horizontally and do what we can to make that workflow, as Dan said, to find those bottlenecks and try to eliminate those bottlenecks as effectively as we can. Dan?
So the question I have is, what are we measuring in our value stream management? What are we measuring to ensure we're optimizing the right things and doing them in the right order? That would help us increase flow. So there are some key questions on the screen here, and there are a couple others that we could probably add to this. But with each program increment, or say quarterly time box, are we increasing the number of features that we can deliver? If so, then we know we're optimizing our productivity and our methods of development. But is our time to market getting shorter? That is a key metric, both from the DevOps perspective as well as just value stream management in general. Are we maximizing the capacity of our full-time employees and contractors? Or are we asking them to waste time, causing their own bottlenecks? Are we able to adopt emerging tech? Well, a couple additional bonus questions here might be, are we responding to our customers' needs on a timely basis? That's an important aspect, because we are in the modern age. We are in the sense and respond age, not in the make and sell age in this world of software. Are we releasing a quality product or service? How are we achieving the feedback that we need? So these are some of the questions that we want to know in optimizing our flow. Next slide. So think in terms of a high-level value stream here, and this is a very high level with only 4 basic steps. Do we have a continuous flow of value? And this shows you an endless loop of ideation and creation and release and operations and support and so on, with achieving feedback from our customer. The key here is that our thought process isn't just on the technical work that we're doing and the DevOps work that we're doing, but in the continuous flow of value all the way from concept to cash. In other words, how well do we sense and respond to our customers, and how quickly can we deliver value back to them? Next. So the key here is that it's true that Agile gets our value and our products and our services built. DevOps gets it delivered. But is that the full story? It isn't always the full story. And SAFe has recognized this by adding customer centricity and design thinking and other disciplines and domains to their framework in order to satisfy the full story. It's called out for a very good reason, that we include these additional disciplines that affect the total flow to market. And that we learn continuously as an organization from every facet of the value stream so that we can optimize that total time to value, which is called out here. So the green stripe there is the total time to value, which includes far more than just our technical disciplines. Lee?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So what I'm going to do now is try to build on some of those key points with a very quick introduction to the flow framework, which was introduced in this book, Project to Product by Mick Kirsten. And in this book, he calls out how complex value streams are in software delivery. Now, value stream management is not new to the world. People have been practicing value stream mapping, value stream management in many different industries over time. But as we bring it into our world and look at how do we manage these operational and development value streams that are very complex, with teams of teams working in all different kinds of tools, with all different kinds of artifacts that flow, like Dan said, from the very beginning through the very end, how do we model that, and how do we measure that in a way that the business leaders and our technical leaders together can easily understand what's flowing and how our teams are performing? And so the flow framework is a very lean and very prescriptive approach for doing this so that we can get started in this world of value stream management. And it calls out 4 key flow metrics: flow velocity, flow efficiency, flow time, and flow load, as well as a flow distribution, where we talk about the balance of flow work that flows in the value stream, which I'll talk about here in a minute in our next slide. And one of the other key pieces of the flow framework is this correlation to business results in terms of value, cost, quality, and happiness. So the idea is that for any value stream that we measure, whether that be an internal customer-facing value stream or an external customer-facing value stream, that we always think about things in terms of the customer. The customer may be internal or external, and that we're looking at what value, cost, quality, and happiness that we're providing by improving the flow of value in our value stream. Now, one of the key concepts here in the flow framework, as well as in the idea of moving from a project style of management of your business value to a product style, is this idea that all of this work, all of these artifacts can be abstracted up into this 4 mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive set of flow items: features, defects, risk, and debt, where features are the new business value that are pulled by your customers, and defects are quality improvements pulled by your customers. Risks and debt, on the other hand, are security, availability, compliance type elements that are pulled by your internal risk officers, and debt, your technical debt and your process improvements that are pulled by your enterprise architects and your process engineers. The idea being that when we're thinking about things from a value stream, we're in for the long haul. And so we've got to be thinking about not only providing our customers new business value, but also protecting the business value that we have. And that's why risks and debt are elevated to this level, in the same level as we commonly think of features and defects when we think about planning and taking on the type of work that needs to be developed, and also for measuring that in the flow in the value stream. So in our next session here, which we'll get into here momentarily, I'm going to introduce Tasktop Viz, which is an implementation of the flow framework, and we're going to look at an actual product value stream, and we're going to go through. I'll introduce the flow metrics and what we see on the dashboard of Viz, and Dan and I are going to walk through a series of analysis of the different flow metrics and what we're seeing for that team. So together, I think what we hope to see from this as we all participate is that with thinking about things from a value stream perspective, from a customer-centric perspective, and being able to measure comprehensively across all the activity that happens in the value stream in a consistent and prescriptive manner, that we'll be learning to see, maybe sometimes for the first time, learning to see what's happening across all of our teams, across this flow. And with that learning, where we might have bottlenecks or waste, and where we might have opportunities to improve that overall flow by removing or reducing those things that are most constraining to that flow. So with that, I'm going to transition over to my instance of Tasktop Biz, and we'll look at that. One other thing I wanted to note is we're going to go through this interactive session, Dan and I, but we put a pause right in the middle so that we can answer any questions that may arise from this initial information and from the discussion that we have. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'll try to get to those when we get to that point. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes here to explain what we're seeing on my screen with Tasktop Viz and the flow metrics, so that then we can get into our discussion and everybody will have a pretty good idea of what we mean by flow metrics and value stream management. So here we're looking at a product value stream around a predictive analytics product. And there's a team of teams working on this, some 42 people across multiple colleges and universities and an open source group that are trying to put together, or they have been putting together and have been releasing a predictive analytics product, a tool that colleges and universities can use for those students who they want to have early warning signs for those students that might be struggling with adapting to the college life, usually your first and second year students. And the idea is if they can flag these students early with recognizing patterns, like maybe they're not going to lunch or they're not attending classes regularly or whatever it might be, if they can flag that, then they can help the administrators can help get early additional assistance to those students so that they can be more successful with their studies and be retained and continue on at the college rather than dropping out without anyone really being aware of what happened. So that's the backstory behind this. What we're looking at here is the dashboard display for this product value stream. We have other product value streams in my Viz instance, for instance, a home insurance, a payment platform. Each of them will look very similar in terms of the layout of the information and the type of information that we're measuring. As I mentioned, the four flow metrics as well as the flow distribution. The way we look at this, features are color coded in green, defects are in red, risk items are in yellow, and debt items are in purple. Remember I said there are only 4 flow item types that we're measuring that are abstracted from all of the different artifacts that are flowing in the value stream. I just want to take a minute to go through each one of these and then we'll begin our discussion, Dan. So business results, each value stream that you measure will have, will want to relate their business value flow that we're measuring to targets. Like in this case, this team is looking at their revenue targets, how they're tracking with new sales. They're also looking at quality issues like defects that are defects per release. They're looking at cost issues there with FTE costs. And as far as happiness goes, which is really a measure of how engaged are our team members, we're looking at turnover rate here for this particular product value stream. Now, each product value stream will define those in their own way, but they're, with the flow framework, we categorize these under value, quality, cost, and happiness so that again, as a enterprise may have many value streams, as you go from one value stream to another, compare and contrast, they'll have their own set of business results that they're correlating their deliveries to in terms of the flow of business value. So let's look at these metrics for a second and I'll explain these. Flow velocity here is a throughput measure for how many of these flow items this set of teams have released in a period of time. And the time that I've set to measure here to look at for this team or this product value stream is between May 15th and July 31st, which is about 11 weeks, I believe, of period of time over there that these measurements have been collected. So in this period of time, this product value stream, which again is a set of teams, has actually delivered 1,000 flow items, combination of features, defects, risks, and debt. Now, if we take a look at flow time, this metric here is about the average amount of time it takes for a feature, defect, risk, or debt from beginning to end. So from the time that we mark it as active until it's done, this value stream has an average of about 7 days. The flow efficiency is a measure of how much of our time are we actively working on a flow item versus how much time it's in a wait state. So we can use this. This is a really good metric to look for where we might have waste, where we might be waiting for a very long amount of time, and understanding if that's something that we can dive in and look at. Flow load is your work in process. This is how much work has been started and it is either active or in a waiting state over time. So this is actually a leading indicator, because this work is in process right now, and how this work proceeds will give us an indication to how we're going to do with our flow velocity and our flow time in the coming days, weeks, and months. And then flow distribution, to round things out, this is a view of how our balance exists among features, defects, risk, and debt in terms of what are our priorities? Are we looking to take on technical debt in this program increment? Are we looking to improve feature delivery? How are we balanced out here? And this shows you that distribution there as well. So I hope that gives you a good overview of the flow metrics. I'm going to now just ask Dan. Dan, as you take a look at these metrics and you see this team and this idea of this team working in higher ed for a delivery of a predictive analytics systems, is there anything that strikes you right off the bat from what we're seeing here?
Yeah, putting my agile coach hat on, I would look at this and I would say in the flow time, I see an increasing duration for feature delivery, which then tells me, okay, we're getting slower as we go. What might be some of the causes for that? I see over in the flow load, bottom left, we have pretty high work in process, or WIP. And so then I would want to analyze what is making up that WIP? What are we actually spending most of our time on? And as you can see, the red and purple stripes are far more than half of our workload. And that tells me that we have a high defect load, and we're leaving technical debt on the table as we go, which means we're having to come back and revisit it, right? So that exposes, I would say, a lack of initial quality, a lack of focus on initial quality. Are we following the correct practices here? Now, by not focusing on that initial quality, it actually slows us down, because now we have more and more rework, which is going to slow down the delivery of our features. In other words, we may be attempting to meet artificial deadlines, which is simply a date assigned to, into unestimated work. So by eliminating rework, we would coach that the entire value stream can flow faster, because we're not wasting time on all that rework.
Yeah, I mean, that's just at a glance. I hope everyone can see this sort of learning to see. This is a really important lean concept, is learning to see what is happening by visualizing our work, making work visible. I'm going to go to one of the points you made early in that, Dan, and talk about the flow time metric here. Here I'm focusing in on the feature flow time, and we can see over the months, now we have just half of May, but into June, our flow time averaged about 12 days. And then in July, it's 28 days. Our flow time seems to be increasing, as you mentioned, here for features significantly. And when I compare that to defects for the very same period of time, our defect timing is much faster, the lead time for defects, the flow time, and it's steady at about 3 days versus a 12 and 28 day that we saw with the feature delivery. What does that say to you, Dan? How does that make sense? what are you seeing with this team and what they're doing here?
Well, it certainly shows that at least a third of our total effort is being spent on quality problems. We're allowing defects to escape our iterations. And so these debts are accumulating. And with a rush to get features out the door, we're actually going slower and slower on the business feature delivery. But the fact that we have all this mounting debt, even though we can handle each of these defects relatively quickly, it's killing our productivity of getting real value out the door. So intuitively, you'd think that, you know, because the team spends longer times with their features, they're just being more thorough. But that doesn't appear to be the case based on what we're visualizing here. You know, since the defects are piling up into the inbox of the team, they're going to continue to slow down in their delivery.
Yeah, I think we've probably all been in that sort of scenario somewhere in our careers where it feels like a sinking feeling in your stomach, like quicksand. We're tangled up in this debt, and I can see from this team they seem to have a problem with defects continuing to climb for each release, and I would guess that has something to do with this turnover rate too. It can't be a whole lot of fun working on a team where things are getting more and more difficult like this, like we're seeing here. Although that's just, you know, quick observation. I also wanted to ask you, if you look at flow load, like you mentioned, we have at this point in time 353, so an average of 347 over time, but 353 items are in progress right now. This is actively started. We actually started this work, and we're releasing over 11 weeks some 1,000 items. So we actually, if I think about it, just simplistically, we have like 3 weeks worth of work sitting here. If we just turned off the faucet, let's say, so to speak, and just cleaned out what we have already in progress, we would have quite a bit of time before we would even clear that out. And so your thoughts on the work in process, Dan?
Yeah, high WIP is an illusion of productivity. You know, so leadership may say, yeah, we want all this work worked on. We want to see that you're active and busy and doing all this stuff. But it actually makes us go slower because of context switching. If you combine that with, you know, the defect count here, you can see that, you know, WIP is really tough on them. Some teams are good at starting things and starting new features, but not good at finishing them. And you can see at least a third of the total work here is defect work. If you add the technical debt, we're well over 50%, which is potential waste because we have not had a focus on sound quality technical practices to begin with. So I would coach this set of teams. I would coach them on a test-first approach. Let's automate those tests, not allow any defects to escape, you know, a sprint any more than necessary. And I would redefine a defect as a missed test. You know, it is a, if you haven't written the test, then you can expect a defect, you know, to emerge downstream.
Yeah, right, sure. Yeah, thanks.
So,
that's really
insightful. Yeah, so over time, it's just wasting a lot of effort on bad quality, which would diminish over time if we were writing our tests first, automating the tests, not allowing defects to go downstream.
Right. And I want to drill in to something you also mentioned earlier about diving in and looking closer at what causes the issues in work in process. So I'm going to use this analytic here in Tasktop Viz called Find Bottlenecks, and I'm going to filter on the features. So we can just look at features for a moment as to where we have bottlenecks. And let me explain this graph here first, everyone. So up here is a scatter plot of information showing the relative amount of time that an item would spend in a specific state. So an artifact, in this case, a feature, would spend in a certain state of all the states that it might transition through from, you know, new to in progress, waiting for testing, and so on. Those kinds of states are what I'm talking about. So the state duration index. So for instance, something that's way over here on the right would, let's say that this is at 10 or 12, is going to take 10 times longer than something that's a 1 down here, as far as like how long an artifact spends in a certain state. And the way to read this graph then is that's the duration, and the vertical axis here is the number of artifacts that are in that state at any given time for a large amount of time, or that amount of time. So the way we typically look at this initially is to think that things are down here in lower left that are happening relatively quickly, and they're not sort of backing up in terms of number of artifacts, are probably moving and flowing pretty well. Things that are to the right and are high, like this blue dot over here, are representing a number of artifacts that have been trapped in that state for a long amount of time. So we can see here user stories. If you can all see this, this is saying user stories have been in this defining state quite a bit longer in general than, for instance, stories that are down here in the ready for dev state, or other artifacts that are in different states that are moving along pretty quickly. So Dan, your thoughts at a first glance of looking at this, this analytic?
Yeah, well, first glance, I would always go to the very dot that you have your cursor on there, because you know, that's where the problem appears to be. Now, there could be many reasons why it's taking so long to ideate those features or those stories, and it could be just they're spending way too much time on initial analysis, big design up front kind of an approach.
Right.
You know, there may be unclear requirements that they're waiting on vendors, or they're waiting on some requirements clarification before they can get started. Or they may be using a hybrid approach. They're not doing things in an agile manner and breaking things down small enough. So their stories or features may be way too big. There may be the need to do some quick prototyping here to find the right path, so that they don't waste time on a single decision, and they can prove or disprove those early decisions. They may not be practicing like behavior-driven development, you know, where they're building the tests that are in business terms up front, so that they know what behaviors they're seeking early. And all this is just burning time with a bunch of potential guesswork.
Yeah, and with Viz here, we can also see particular projects like Gamma and Galaxy here, and Falcon seem to be having these problems, where like cybernetics down here and others are doing a little better in terms of some of their work. Also, as you mentioned, when I drilled into this to this particular state duration that is held up, one of the things to note here, I think, is like you said earlier, sometimes we're good at starting work, but we're not good at finishing it. So I mean, if you even just look at the ID numbers of these issues, they tend to be wide ranging. So I kind of wonder if some of these are actually just stale or neglected work that maybe we just need to, maybe it's just causing some thrashing, like you said, of wasting time looking at items that were, maybe we have no intention of finishing. I don't know, but it could be the case. All right, so I think we're at a point, Dan, if we might like to see if there are any questions before we continue on with a couple more of these learning to see discussions. Do we have anything from the chat, Alex or Alyssa?
I think there were some items in the QA set as well as the chat. So I'm not who's moderating that.
Sure. So we have a few things. So first thing is there's no correlation between flow load features and flow state scatter graphs. Reason being, on an average, the scatter graph shows less than 3 days. So shouldn't the features reduce in flow load?
Are we talking about this view here?
Sorry, so this is Lee. The duration index here is a relative duration. It's not a number of days. So if for instance, this item that I'm hovering over here is a 2 and this item is a 10. That's telling us that an item, this set of artifact, this state where a set of artifacts was held in that state was held in there much longer than over here on the left. So like 5 times as long as over here. And it's done relatively because it's a matter of looking at each of these elements in a relative manner so that we can plot that to understand where do we have cases of outliers.
And that's usually how we coach. You know, we coach based on the exceptions. You know, we see anti-patterns or potential anti-patterns. They may not be anti-patterns. They may be perfectly legit. But the key is, you know, how are we going to know that we have a potential issue that needs to be resolved unless we can visualize it somehow, you know, to get a clue where we need to go look next. And then we just simply prioritize the coaching based on the severity of the anti-pattern, whatever that happens to be.
Do we have another question, Alex?
Sure. So with the number of features, are you assuming that they are roughly the same size? Similarly, how do you measure time to market if there are different sized features?
Yeah, so I'll start with that. So typically when you set up to measure the value stream, you want to look at all of the artifacts, and then there'll be, and we have coaches in working with teams like Dan's team as well. We want to look at what is the sort of main current that's flowing in that value stream and measure those artifacts. Now, some may have relatively longer periods of time than others, and there are ways to filter those in the view so that you could say, for instance, I have, let's say, some of my artifacts might be epics and some of them might be stories, and I'd like to understand and compare and contrast how quickly those are flowing. So, for instance, an epic may flow at a rate different than a set of stories, if that's some of the main areas that we're measuring. And so we want to be able to see those together and also separately so that we can make a good understanding of how that work is flowing. So there are options and ways to model that. Yes, Dan?
Yeah, and the dashboard is showing you, you're basically looking at an average artifact, you know, cumulative averages. But it allows you then to drill in and look at the actual artifacts and see what their relative size are. And you know, so we can look at, if we have a problem with the averages, then we know we may have some real outliers once we get into the details. But the key is to knowing where to look first.
Exactly. Again, it's about learning to see, and once we sort of get that, and also as we model this initially, Tasktop Viz will enable you to rework your modeling, and it'll recalculate based on how you might want to do that. So you don't have to have it perfect the first time, but it is important to get in there and start to see what's happening, as Dan said, in a cumulative fashion.
Lee, can you click on the green stripe in flow velocity? Does that then open up an opportunity to see a list of those features and look at approximate?
No, we would look at those features through the through this analytic to see what they are. So yeah,
okay,
that's the best
all right,
way.
so this is where we know what they are.
Yep, and these are the items that have closed already. These are the items that are in progress. So that's how we would take a look at what's happening right now.
Okay.
Yep. Do we have time for one more question, maybe? We do have a couple more things to go through here.
Sure, yeah. Just one good one is, which metric would you recommend, which metric would you recommend starting with for a team who is not tracking anything?
Well,
yeah. I know what my opinion is, and it has everything to do with quality.
Yeah.
Quality first. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, some people say, you know, like these metrics are related. So some people say the metric that matters is flow time. That's, you know, that's lead time throughout the entire value stream. But if you think about it, if you're focusing on flow time, there's a relationship with flow velocity because that's your throughput and your capacity of what the team will deliver. But it's important to look at these and their relationships, I think, across each other, because when we look at something like velocity and flow load, and we see that maybe we have too much work in process, we can start to see that by improving or reducing the work in process, setting WIP limits, and thinking about things as a real pull system instead of what may have been a push system that got us here in the first place, would allow us to understand what is our actual real capacity here, what is our potential flow velocity that we could realize if we were able to address these problems. And likewise, efficiency helps us understand where we might be waiting longer than we think we should be for things like approvals and architectural boards to get together and things like that. So yeah, I agree. Quality is critical, and quality first, like Dan said, and then also this idea that these metrics are interrelated. And so you could say there's one that matters to me, there's one metric that matters, but I think it's important to look at them as a whole to understand. Again, if you subscribe to the theory of constraints, there's this concept that there will always be at least one bottleneck, and that bottleneck, we want to find the bottleneck that is most constraining to our flow, and we may need several views to be able to find that. Okay, so I have a couple of other questions for you, Dan, if you're all right. So,
sure.
Do you have any, again, any quick observations from your understanding of the flow metrics and this value streams data and the product that this value stream is the backstory I try to explain about the higher ed nature of the predictive analytics solution?
Let's see. How many flow items were delivered during the current period? Actual features.
Oh, features delivery? Yeah,
because we delivered 1,000 items overall.
Yes.
How many actual? Okay, so out of that, we're looking at just over a quarter was actual business value. New business value.
Right, 268 out of 1,000. Right.
Right. And are there any risk items here?
Risk, they delivered only 13 in that 11-week period. Right.
So out of 1,000 deliverables, there were 13 risk items.
That's correct.
Now, does this university, have policies for protecting personal information of their students and faculty?
Sure they do. Yeah. Right.
And so forth. So this would tell me that there doesn't seem to be a heavy focus on InfoSec or compliance issues. That they may be trying to get, working features out the door, but they're not really concerned, at least at this point, from what I would see. I would ask the question, how are we protecting, using a DevSecOps mentality, how are we protecting information and managing our risk when such a small percentage of the feature work is risk-oriented?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Dan. I mean, it's striking 13 to 1,000. And you look at distribution over here, it's just a thin line of what we've got for risk items. 1%, 1.6%, 1.2% of the work delivered was dealing with this. And you've got to know that in higher ed, there's all kinds of regulatory concerns about protecting data. So again, this may be a surprise for this team when they see this for the first time, because they may just not realize of all the things they're working on, they really haven't been paying attention to this piece. And
this may be a contributing factor to the number of defects and technical debt that's in there, is because they're having to come back in after the fact and take care of some of their non-functional requirements, compliance issues, InfoSec issues, performance issues.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that goes into risk. So that the overall health of their stack and their approach to threat mitigation and so forth may be getting the back seat as they're developing new features, and they're deferring it, and it's causing some of these problems. So that might be one of the causes here.
Yeah, and if you think about what I try to point out from the Project to Product book, where Mick introduces a flow framework, that idea of making sure that we're protecting business value by addressing risk and debt issues is clearly a concern here. I think I have time for one more question, Dan, if you can. If we take a look, I wanted to ask you this, because I was looking at this earlier in preparation. If we take a look at the feature delivery here, we see that our feature, the flow load, or flow time, I mean, for these features to be delivered has climbing pretty rapidly. So it's taking longer to get this stuff done, but at the same time, we're actually delivering more features as we look at the throughput of our team here. So that seems counterintuitive to me, that usually you'd think if something's taking longer to do, you'd be delivering less of it. Do you have any thoughts about that offhand, Dan?
Well, I think the clues that we saw earlier on the defect count and the tech debt count are a contributing factor to this. We have an illusion of productivity going on here, based on my initial impression of this, is that I want to find out why we appear to be delivering new features, but we are also, dealing with a very high load of defects and so forth. So that tells me that we're throwing features out the door that may not be fully vetted. We're taking some shortcuts to meet those deadlines. Right. So, technical debt is growing as we take shortcuts.
Yeah. And it probably has something to do with this increasing measure we have here of average defects per release. We're just perhaps in one of those death marches or death spirals that we see sometimes.
Yeah. So we're probably, the teams are probably spending more time on non-value added deliverables because of the defects and tech debt, but they're throwing these features out the door and then having to do rework later. So if we were to look at this same trend over a longer period of time, we might, it might expose that fact that our rework is not diminishing as we put out higher and higher number of features. And that would tell us that, we're throwing bad quality out the door.
Exactly. All right. So with that, I think since we have about 10 minutes left in our session, I'll come back to the slide deck. I know we had a couple of slides, Dan, you might like to cover around final thoughts here.
Yeah, so when we're optimizing our value streams, using the theory of constraints, we do one optimization at a time, find your biggest constraint and fix that one first. Only work on one at a time. And that way you can actually measure the result, measure the improvement. And I always start with quality. That's usually, so far, I haven't seen an exception in 17 transformations to Agile at scale in my career so far. It has always started with quality or the lack thereof as the main bottleneck in their delivery of good products and having happy customers. And so, even if I deliver a feature on time, but it has defects in it, then you have not delivered it on time.
Right.
Because you're going to be reworking it, and you're building up frustration in your customers' eyes. It's annoying them. And I can't inspect quality into a product. I can't wait until it's out the door before I start inspecting quality. It's got to be built in, and that requires a test-first approach. So that's the message here is, we're not here to solve all the problems in the flow, in the value stream all at once. You find your biggest constraint, fix that first. It's usually going to come down to something related to quality. And don't neglect the big elephant in the room. That was the previous slide was about. Always do the biggest one first, right? Yeah, they didn't see the elephant. He was sitting right there. Go ahead. You can advance. Here are some, a lot of these are technical books and DevOps oriented books, but they all help you accelerate your value stream. It's all excellent reading, highly recommended.
Yes, thank you, Dan. All right, so Alex, I think we've covered most everything we planned on. I know if anyone, I didn't think we'd have time to get into how Tasktop Viz abstracts and how you do the modeling and kind of the plumbing behind the metrics that we saw there. Be happy to do that if anyone would like to contact us at Tasktop. We can set up an in-depth demonstration on that piece of what we saw today. But I hope everyone saw that with value stream management and being able to measure the value stream and see these having a very prescriptive, lean-oriented approach to those metrics, that we can learn to see what's happening in our value stream in terms of the flow of business value, where we may have issues. I know this particular case had a lot of issues, but where we have issues and where we might be able to dig in and learn how to make that flow better.
Awesome. So we want to take the last few minutes here to address a few more of the questions that we had come in.
Okay.
So how is flow efficiency calculated?
Okay, let me show you the formula here. So flow efficiency, I actually have a little pop-up here that'll explain it. So flow efficiency is the measure of waste in the value stream. So it tracks the ratio of active time versus waiting time for the total flow time. Okay, so you can see here, if you can see this diagram, we have a certain amount of time where we're active, and then we have a time where we're waiting, and then we'll be active again and waiting. This would be derived from the states of the native artifacts as states changes are noted in tools like a JIRA or something like that. And that's how that's calculated. And this is a really common thing actually in the book that Dan has mentioned here, this value stream mapping book by Karen Martin and Mike Osterling. They really do a nice job of explaining value-added processing, non-value-added processing, and this idea there's something in between, which is non-value added from a customer's perspective, but it might be required for a regulatory type thing. And so you can calculate the efficiency based on that information. Did you want to add anything to that, Dan?
No, you expressed it perfectly.
Any other questions, Alex?
What is the allowable tech debt as a rule of thumb?
0.
Right.
leave no new tech debt on the table, and look for opportunities to leapfrog over old tech debt by modernizing your stack. That's why so many companies go to the cloud, even though it's expensive to do so. If they have a whole bunch of legacy systems, and you can leapfrog over and bypass the need to fix a lot of that old stuff to make it go perform better. Look for opportunities to leapfrog over the tech debt. Otherwise, you'll be bogged down for a long time. A client I just left, we uncovered close to 5 years in our assessment, 5 years worth of epic-sized technical debt. There is no possible way they would ever catch up on that.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And so you have to modernize. You look for ways to not have to do that technical debt work, and use automation. But by no means allow new technical debt to pile up.
Yeah,
do it right the first time. Yeah, do it right the first time, because the interest on technical debt is exponential.
Yeah, and I just want to add, that's why this distribution view is really critical, because it's telling us what we've done. Even if we set out to take on and sort of, take on and retire some technical debt, we actually maybe didn't do it, and what we had as a priority may not have been realized. So it's important for the business to have that information so they can say things like, we need to address this, and we need to address it now rather than continuing to sweep it under the carpet.
Great. The next question is there a reason why time to market is not part of the business results?
No, that could be there. This configuration of what you choose to define in the business results is configurable. So you can set up a category and say, it would be time to market or whatever might be important. In fact, I should have pointed out, for something like an internal value stream. Like I have this payment platform value stream. If you look at their business results, they're very different. So they're looking at how responsive are we to requests that people are asking us from internally? What's our satisfaction for our customers, our internal customers? And quality issues are really different here. Like how many of our components have we decoupled if this is a platform, and then what's the accuracy of our documentation? So within value, cost, quality, and happiness, you can define those and capture and track those. And again, you'll want to correlate those with how the metrics for this product value stream are showing for a duration of time.
Yeah, there's very little you can't track with this, and you can find the answers to those types of questions, depending on how you configure it.
And so
it's really
great segue into one final question here is, how does Viz capture these metrics from our existing tools? What about handoffs between tools, portfolio planning, requirements management, ALM, deployment, etc.?
Yeah, so I didn't have time to really get into how we do that, but I'll just give you a glimpse. So let me go back to my predictive analytics value stream. We have three tabs for configuring your tools that are in use, and then the artifacts from those tools and how they're abstracted into the flow items, and then a modeling of how the states relate to the flow item states. And so just to give you an idea here, for this value stream, they're doing their planning in a PPM tool and in a platform design for their ideation type of stuff in Azure DevOps here, and I think it was CA PPM. And then their tracking of their Agile work is done in version 1 with a couple of projects and some work in GitLab, and also their incidents, problems, and requests are coming in through ServiceNow. So the way this works in Tasktop is in Tasktop Viz is you would define that you want to add an artifact from a given tool that has one of the tools that you have in your value stream. You would choose that tool. Let's say I wanted to do something with Jira, and then you would choose the projects that you want to add to that from the set of projects that the value stream participates in, and then you would begin to move on to the next step, which is modeling, which again, I could spend some time on this we'll certainly be happy to beyond this session here to get in and describe how that's done. But it's really very powerful point and click. And if you think about it, it's quite a feat to abstract from all these tools, all the different native artifacts and all the states of those native artifacts, and bring those up into something that is as prescriptive as we see here with the flow framework, and then to realize that in a tool like Tasktop is.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys, and it was a great presentation. We appreciate your time. Appreciate everybody else joining as well, and we look forward to following up with not only the recording, but a few of the ways that we are working with our clients hands-on in terms of assessments, new offerings, cutting-edge ways to continue to optimize the way you're delivering customer value and satisfying customer needs. So thank you all again, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you, Lee and Dan. Definitely appreciate both of your time.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.